or stilts next time you see her there with Carmelo and Reggie Miller. And that's with Reggie Miller saying he's the third best shooter in the state of Indiana right now.
There's a new shooter from Indiana. See, I'm the third best shooter in the state of Indiana now. Okay. It goes Caitlin, Tyrese, and now myself.
We'll have to get Tyrese's opinion on that. I'm not sure Tyrese would agree.
So there you go. Caitlin talking about that, poking fun at the appearance. That was one of the first things that stood out. Then there is the important question, which came later in the broadcast about the CBA. And one thing you have to like about it.
Nobody expected it to unfold like this. Not the producers, not the league, not even NBC, because it was supposed to be simple. Just a quick segment, a harmless crossover moment. The college star shows up, smiles, talks for 2 minutes, and disappears. That's what everyone assumed. But by the end of the night, the entire atmosphere had shifted. Phones were buzzing, executives were whispering, veterans were watching the screen like they'd witnessed something they weren't meant to see. Because in less than 2 hours, Caitlin Clark didn't come across like a guest. She came across like the main attraction. And that's where the tension started. It wasn't loud or dramatic at first, just a normal NBA broadcast on NBC Sports, highlights rolling, analysts joking, crowd noise in the background. Then the host casually said her name, Caitlin Clark. Simple, harmless, except it wasn't. The moment the camera cut to her, the energy changed. Not excitement, not hype, something heavier, something uneasy, like everyone suddenly realized this wasn't supposed to happen yet. She wasn't supposed to be here this soon, this big, on this stage. But she was. Calm, composed, no nerves, no rookie awkwardness, sitting between veteran analysts like she'd been doing it for a decade. And the wild part was she didn't look impressed, she didn't seem overly grateful, she didn't act like someone who had just been invited onto the biggest basketball stage in America.
In women's game right now, or the game in general, about Caitlin Clark. In the game in general, that's all I gotta say is that that is not something that the WNBA will be happy with. We saw it. The WNBPA said that Alyssa Thomas was the reason why people are watching. And by the way, it's not even, people are like, oh, it was the finals about Alyssa Thomas. No. They literally said, it wasn't just the playoffs, but our regular season broke records as fans went to watch Alyssa Thomas.
She spoke like she owned the space, breaking down pick-and-roll coverages, pointing out defensive mistakes, even correcting the host and former players, not like someone trying to earn a seat at the table, but like someone who had always belonged there. Viewers noticed instantly. Social media started moving fast, clips spreading everywhere. People weren't saying, oh look, it's a WNBA rookie. They were saying, wait, she's actually good. Why is she this comfortable? How does a rookie sound like this? And that's when it stopped being cute. It wasn't hype anymore, it wasn't a novelty anymore, it was authority. And authority is dangerous, especially when nobody planned for it. What fans didn't see was what was happening behind the scenes. Phones were already lighting up, front office staff texting each other, executives whispering the same questions. Are you watching this? Why is she on prime time? Since when did this happen?
He's confident a CBA will get done. Then there were some other topics hit up on the broadcast as well, including her wanting to play at Madison Square Garden. You know, that is where she was broadcasting from, the Knicks and the Lakers. It is a great arena. I've spent a lot of time in the Garden.
Lakers and the Knicks taking center stage here for the 302nd overall meeting. And for the first time ever, we've got basketball night in America, the first Sunday in February. And we're joined by our special correspondent. Welcome to the team, Caitlin Clark. Yes.
Welcome. MSG for a Knicks game. It's pretty cool.
I know, it's her first Knicks game, first time feeling.
For years, there was an unwritten rule. WNBA stars stayed in their lane, and the NBA stayed in theirs. Two separate worlds with separate attention, separate money, separate spotlights. Nobody was supposed to cross that boundary, especially not a rookie. But nobody ever explained that rule to Caitlin Clark, or maybe she simply didn't care. While others waited patiently for permission, she walked straight onto the biggest stage in basketball media like the doors had never been closed. And then came the moment nobody saw coming. The broadcast cut to Madison Square Garden, packed, roaring, legendary, The kind of arena where history gets written. And the crowd wasn't chanting for the NBA stars. They weren't even chanting for the game. They were chanting her name. Caitlin. 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 On an NBA night. Let that sink in. A WNBA rookie getting louder cheers than NBA veterans inside the Garden. That isn't normal, that isn't marketing, that's takeover energy. And takeover energy makes people nervous, especially the ones in charge, because suddenly this isn't a cute cameo or a simple crossover. It feels like something bigger, a shift, and when shifts happen, control starts slipping.
There's a new shooter from Indiana. I'm the third best shooter in the state of Indiana now. Okay. It goes Caitlin, Tyrese, and now myself.
We'll have to get Tyrese's opinion on that. I'm not sure Tyrese would agree.
Right here. She's taking over for me right now.
Into the arena.
Well, I feel fortunate enough. A lot of the arenas we go into, a lot of people are cheering for our team, which is pretty nice.
Snap.
But there are some road games. I think even the Liberty fans, San Francisco, the Valkyries have a great crowd. Like, you want to take them out of it right away. You want to make them call the first time out. I think that's kind of what we always talk about. But that's what makes it fun. And I like what he said. If you're a star, like, these are the games you show up for. And that's really true. Like, these are the games that just mean a little bit more. Like MSG on a Sunday night. Like, that's.
Inside the Women's National Basketball Association offices, insiders later admitted the same word kept surfacing again and again, unplanned. Nobody expected her to take over the broadcast. Nobody predicted the ratings would surge. Nobody thought NBA fans would be saying, "Wait, who is she? I'm tuning in for her." And that's when the fear starts creeping in, because if fans follow her, they don't really need the league. If networks reach out to her directly, they don't really need the league. If sponsors want her face front and center, they don't really need the league. And once a player no longer depends on the system starts to panic. Veterans felt it too. Imagine grinding for a decade through empty arenas, commercial flights, small paychecks, fighting every year just to be taken seriously, and then a 22-year-old shows up and in one night gets more national spotlight than you've had in your entire career. That doesn't feel motivating. That feels personal. That feels like replacement. So the whispers began. This is too much. They're pushing her everywhere. It's just hype. But the numbers didn't stop. Every segment she touched spiked ratings. Every clip she appeared in blew up online, not a little, but massively. And it exposed the truth nobody wanted to say out loud. She wasn't riding the league's wave, the league was riding hers.
Basketball in the women's game right now, or the game in general. So we said, let's have a bigger conversation. And it's just so crazy that it feels like every other sport will just come out and say what it is besides the WNBA. The NBA is not scared to acknowledge that there's no more iconic figure in basketball. Not just the women's game, but possibly the game in general than Caitlin Clark. But we would not hear that in the WNBA space. We wouldn't hear that from WNBA media. But the NBA media and the NBA and the league itself is not scared to say it. Like we've seen it when Caitlin does golf events. It just seems like every league but her own is not.
That's the problem, it's backwards, and backwards is always dangerous. Then something even stranger happened. She wasn't just solid on camera, she started running the entire room. Hosts leaned into her questions. Guests paused for her opinion. Former NBA players actually nodded along while she broke down plays. A rookie guiding veterans on national television. That isn't normal. That's control. And control creates enemies quickly, because now it doesn't feel like, wow, women's basketball is rising. It feels like, how did we not see this coming? And nothing humiliates executives more than missing the future right in front of them. Insiders say the harsh truth is NBC wasn't even the first call. Another network hesitated, stalled, overanalyzed. A classic corporate mistake. While they were still evaluating, NBC moved fast. Signed, booked, finished. Overnight, they owned the story, which means someone else missed it completely. And when you miss a once-in-a-generation star, people don't forget. That's where the tension really starts, because when the show ended, the silence wasn't celebration. It wasn't congratulations. It was that heavy silence, like everyone in the room had just watched history shift and didn't know whether to applaud or panic.
It doesn't matter what arena it is, what venue, home, road. The biggest thing is Caitlin Clark being back playing basketball and healthy. But, her crack there was good, too. The Liberty probably aren't going to want to move over. She knows the history. The Liberty were owned by the Garden, Dolan, and MSG. They are now owned by Joe Tsai and the, play over at Barclays in Brooklyn. So there's no chance the Liberty would ever play in Madison Square Garden if you know the dynamics between the Knicks.
Because deep down, everyone understood the truth. Caitlin Clark didn't simply appear on NBC. She didn't make a guest spot or a quick cameo. She crossed into a new space. And once a player crosses that line, you can't shove them back into the old box. She wasn't only a WNBA name anymore, she became a basketball presence, period. No labels, no boundaries. And when you reach that level, you stop waiting for approval. You start picking the stage, picking the network, picking the opportunities. That's real power. And leagues hate when players hold power, because power creates leverage. Leverage shifts control. And control is everything. So when the lights went down that night, the arena emptied, and the clips kept spreading everywhere, one uneasy thought lingered inside league offices. If she did this on her very first NBC moment, what happens the next time? Because this didn't feel like the top. It felt like the first signal, the start of something bigger, something the system wasn't prepared for. And that's why nobody wanted to say it out loud, even though everyone was thinking it. This wasn't just an introduction. This wasn't just television. This wasn't just hype. This was the night Caitlin Clark walked onto a platform larger than her entire league and made it feel effortless. And when someone turns a historic moment into something that looks natural, that's when you realize everything has shifted, and the game will never be the same again. She spoke like she owned the space, breaking down pick-and-roll coverages, pointing out defensive mistakes, even correcting the host and former players, not like someone trying to earn a seat at the table, but like someone who had always belonged there. Viewers noticed instantly. Social media started moving fast, clips spreading everywhere. People weren't saying, "Oh look, it's a WNBA rookie." They were saying, "Wait, she's actually good. Why is she this comfortable? How does a rookie sound like this?" And that's when it stopped being cute. It wasn't hype anymore, it wasn't a novelty anymore, it was authority. And authority is dangerous, especially when nobody planned for it. What fans didn't see was what was happening behind the scenes. Phones were already lighting up, front office staff texting each other, executives whispering the same questions. "Are you watching this? Why is she on prime time? Since when did this happen?"